Test 1, 2, 3, test. Sorry. Welcome everyone. Welcome to members of the public and anyone watching online. This is a meeting of the Services, Climate and Communities Overview and Scrutiny Committee. We are not expecting the fire alarm to go off. If it does, please leave everything and follow the exit signs on the Pease Hill side of the building and exit via the Pease Hill door and assemble in St Mary's Passage. Members, when you are not speaking, please ensure you switch off your microphone so the live stream picks up the correct speaker. This is the first meeting of the committee this year and will feel different to most meetings once we get up and running, as today's meeting is more about deciding where we would like to focus our attention this year and developing our work programme. Finally, I'm afraid that the officer who was due to deliver the update item at item 7 has had to excuse themselves due to an urgent personal matter. As they were already deputising to present this item, I don't see that a very meaningful update can be given. I therefore suggest that an alternative date for a briefing for members in the coming weeks is arranged. Is that agreeable to everyone? Good, thank you. So moving on to the first item of the agenda, we have apologies for absence, and I have received apologies for absence from Councillor Cheney Payne, for whom Councillor Anthony Martinelli is substituting. Thank you. Are there any other apologies for absence?
Eva's on her way.
Okay. Right. Great.
Traffic, I suppose.
Yeah. Good. Okay, well, we'll expect her shortly. The second item then moving on is to declarations of interest. Does any member have a declaration of interest to make? Thank you, Dick.
I'm a member of Cambridge Cycling Campaign Chair.
Thank you very much. Myself, I'll say that I have been to the folk festival and have much enjoyed it. So. Thank you, Jean. Noted. Anyone else?
Well, I may as well declare I've also been to the folk festival.
Okay, good. So moving on then to the minutes. We have 6 sets of minutes to approve. I'm giving you the page numbers then on the electronic, just a minute, Dave, on the electronic agenda item. So we've got planning and transport on page 5, which was on the 14th of January. Page 19, we've got planning and transport from the 25th of March. Page 29, we have housing from the 11th of March. And page 45 and 51, we have the environment Scrutiny Committee on the 20th of March, and then page 69 is strategy and resources at the 31st of March. Does anyone have any comments? Dave?
Will we be taking matters arising from those minutes?
I don't think so, unless there's something that we want to put on the agenda and follow up on. So if you've got something, do let us know.
Well, can I, Chair? Sorry. It's complicated. We've been running the system up until today. This is not the 7th of October. The world didn't start today. It started 100 years ago, and those minutes should be subject to scrutiny by us. There's specific topics in there that we need to be talking about. So I know this is complicated, but there's things like what's happening with the Development Corporation, which is in those minutes, what's happening with the reorganisation of local government, which is in the minutes, what's happening with Eakin Road, which are in the minutes. These are just a few things. We will be able to ask questions about that here.
It was at first sight a bit strange to me that we had the strategy and resources minutes coming to this committee. But the idea is that we've split everything into 2, and there might be something that's in those sets of minutes that I called out that applies to both here and the other Performance and Assets Scrutiny Committee. So what's happening is that both scrutinies are looking at the minutes for all of those meetings, and we will all be signing them off. But certain items, like, for example, local government reform, will likely go to the other committee, and so we will not be picking them up here. So, I mean, we're going to talk a little bit about getting stuff on the agenda a bit later on. We can talk then, but Beth and I, Councillor Gardner-Smith and I are both available to, you know, receive suggestions as to what should be on the committee. So if there's anything there that you feel we should be looking at, please let us know. And, you know, if it belongs to this committee, then you know, we'll certainly consider it, and we can put it to the committee and decide whether we want to have it or not.
Well, I mentioned 3 things there. Are we suggesting that they should be dealt with by the other committee?
I didn't catch the third thing that you were...
The third one was Ekin Road, the development at Ekin Road, which caused quite a turmoil, and there was questions asked in the Housing Committee about what was going on, and the officers said that they'd report back. So where do they report back?
So I would say that is housing comes into the Performance and Assets Committee, so that we would not be looking at that either. Okay.
So realistically, they've fallen through the net, haven't they?
No, they're just being looked at by the other committee.
The other committee signed these off and didn't talk about those things.
Well, I understand you're on the other committee, so you can suggest that to Katie, who's here. Katie, do you want to say something? So that was LGR is already on our forward plan. That's from Katie Porrer. And housing too is on the rolling agenda. So it is being picked up, Councillor Bajan.
Chairs of the previous committees. Apologies, I haven't got a mic. Could you just repeat that?
Okay, so I think I've pointed out a minor typo already on page 25. We've got nursery rather than nursery. Has anyone got any other comments? Right, so I'm taking that as approved, and I will sign after this meeting. Okay, so moving on to item 4, which is public questions, but we don't have any, so we will move swiftly on to item 5, and that's the role of the overview and scrutiny in local authorities. So you'll have seen in the papers some materials on the role of the overview and scrutiny committee in local authorities. We here this is our first committee, first meeting of this committee, and so we want to set this up in the first meeting in the way that we mean to go on. We are not whipped. We're all seated in, not in party blocks, and the idea is that we are bringing our expertise and background to the issues brought before us, and give that our attention and detail and challenge to provide to the Cabinet Committee, who will be making the final decision. So the idea is that we are collaborative, we provide helpful and constructive comments, and provide a sort of second sounding board for the Cabinet. There are various ways that items can come to this agenda. There's to this committee. There's pre-scrutiny, where we see items on the forward agenda that are going to come to Cabinet, and we want to have a look at those. That's the pre-scrutiny. We have the opportunity to decide areas that we want to have a deep dive on. So those will be an area that we consider from our experience as being an issue or having a big impact somewhere, and we will all then decide that we need to have deeper dive look at that area of the committee. And then there are various other slightly formal and urgent ways that we can call items into this to this committee. But I think those two items are the main ones that we will be having. And if you want to bring something to the agenda, please contact or get in touch with either myself or Councillor Gardner-Smith. So does anyone have any comments, any questions? We've had quite a lot of training, so we've discussed this in quite a lot of detail. Okay, well, in which case, we will move on to the update on the Folk Festival. But this will be preceded by an outline of the work of the Communities Group across the coming year from the Chief Executive. This was a sort of the same thing as the item 7, which has been cancelled. So the idea behind both items is to give the committee an idea of what's going on so that we can make decisions about whether we want, what we want to look at. So over to you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Let me just turn off my mic. Is that better?
Thank you, Chair. I've just got a short presentation. I think Sam Scarf sends his apologies.
Are we ready?
Thank you, Chair. Sorry about that. Do it all the time, but at the important moments, things always go wrong. So I'll begin again. Sam Scarf sends his apologies. He is on leave. He's in the United States. He's asked me just to share an overview. I think he shared it with you in advance, Chair, of the Communities Group. It's a new group. It's one of the largest groups in the Council. Has that moved on? Yes. Not on that one. So Sam is the director, Sam Shimon, the assistant director, with the main focus on our housing stock, so our role as a social landlord. There are 5 broad areas that Sam has clustered the activity of the group around: health and well-being, providing a safety net to the more vulnerable members of the community in Cambridge, creating a thriving culture, which includes Francis, who will give you a bit more detail about culture, in particular the Folk Festival, ensuring public safety and enabling communities. So this is the new structure that's arisen from the group redesigns that were implemented earlier this year. Sam thought it was important to highlight some prior decisions that the Overview and Scrutiny may want to consider for its forward work programme. So while these have been decided by the Council, they're being implemented, and you may have an interest in how they're doing. Did they achieve their objectives? What impact have they had? So the areas that Sam thought were particularly, he wanted to draw to your attention: the Community Wealth Building Strategy, which was a development of the Council's former anti-poverty strategy; the Culture Strategy, of which the Folk Festival is one part; the review of democratic and community engagement. This built both from the decision to end area committees and to find new ways to reach people in the community that we don't ordinarily hear from. Community grants, there's been several reforms to the way we provide community grants to make them more accessible, more user-friendly for smaller charities, and also provide greater certainty for some of our larger charities which we have an ongoing relationship, the Refugee Resettlement Pledge, and a review that's ongoing about how we use and deliver some of the Section 106 funding in local communities. So I think all of those are quite large, chunky areas that I think that the performance of the council in implementing is actually really vital. The things that Sam wanted to draw the committee's attention to in the year ahead are the leisure contract procurement, which is quite important and was one of the key elements of the council's transformation programme last year. We're trying to deliver leisure in a new way that preserves some of the existing concessions for different types of residents, but also delivers the service in a more efficient way. The public health contract, Sam gave an update to the Cabinet last time it met, and we've submitted a bid to run community health provision or public health provision in a different way with local partners. It's the equality strategy, a review of homelessness, which is quite important, involving all of the local partners in the Cambridge system. Democratic community engagement, which builds, the next step from something decided last year. And he's also, with his staff, designing a new impact and performance management framework. And that's specifically designed to measure how well we're doing as a council against some of the decisions that members have taken. So I think that one's really exciting. So finally, there are some key areas of change in the way that the group will work in future, bringing together health and well-being. So a lot of the types of services that we provided for more vulnerable people are now grouped more closely together. The public safety team may be of interest. That brings together both environmental health and public safety. We're now working more closely in terms of resettlement and community identity and needs. And the Enabling Communities team works more closely now with our residents in a place-based arrangement. So there's been a number of changes which the committee may be interested in future. I can pause there, answer any questions if you've got any, or I can hand over to Francis.
Any questions, anyone? Councillor Bagent.
I turned myself off. Is there an update on the leisure facilities and the contract that's gone out or being considered now? We had a briefing on it some months ago from the person that was running the existing programme. I think it was a consultant. Have we got an update on that situation? And a question that I might be asking again tonight, do we have papers on this?
Thank you, Chair. I could arrange for an update for the committee if that's what you would like, Chair, on the leisure contract.
Yeah, I mean, that's for us all to decide whether we want to look at that. I think the leisure contract is a fairly large thing. It's on the forward plan. I definitely think that's one of the things that we should be looking at. But I mean, let's discuss that perhaps in the section on when we talk about the future plan for us. Councillor Gardner-Smith.
Yeah, I had a question. I can see in the forward plan there's an item, Communities Impact Measurement Framework. You mentioned the Community Wealth Building Strategy. I wonder whether you can say a bit more about how Communities Impact Measurement Framework interacts with that, and whether when we're thinking about the business for this committee, thinking about whether we look at that in conjunction with looking at a review of the Community Wealth Building Strategy progress.
I think it will be a comprehensive framework to try and measure all of the activity in the communities group, and sometimes where that interacts with other parts of the council. So within it, you should be able to have some measures which demonstrate whether or not we're achieving some of our community wealth building and some of our other aims, including homelessness. So I think it's designed to be something that's quite comprehensive. we're testing it first in the communities group and then trying to use that learning to apply to all the key groups in the council, so that the proposal or the plan would be that both overview and scrutiny committees would get a regular update. Some data won't be available quarterly, some will be available every year, but we've got a way of assessing how we're doing against our key objectives that's less focused on the process and more focused on how can we demonstrate outcomes for residents.
Councillor Agent.
Did we test this process about taking it in-house? Or are we just going out onto the open market for tender?
Sorry, hang on. We are not going to be discussing this item now, right? So this is a discussion of what we could be possibly be looking at and be interested in. Let's not get into the detail of a particular item. Yeah?
I came here to scrutinise, Chair. I didn't come here particularly to put things off to the next meeting or the meeting after that. You know, if that was their agenda, it was the officer's agenda, he put those things up there, and yet we're saying we don't talk about them. That doesn't make a lot of sense. I didn't ask that to be on the agenda, the officer put it on the agenda. And now we're saying, oh, we'll put that off till the next meeting or another meeting. We need to be able to go through a difficult conversation at times at these early stages on how this scrutiny is going to work. I was not persuaded that it was a good idea, but I go along with the majority clearly. So we need to have those hard conversations right now, today, or by the next meeting, so that we end up with all the papers in front of us and everything ready for us to actually be able to scrutinise. We were told this would be real scrutiny, you know, you can get your teeth into this. Well, every time I try to open my mouth, I find that my false teeth are falling out.
Thank you, Councillor Bajan. I do sympathise. This, as I said at the beginning, this meeting is going to be slightly strange and not the normal way that we want to do things. I applaud your enthusiasm. Great, it really is great. But this time, it's more sort of scene setting, and it is a little bit frustrating, I agree. But when we do scrutiny, we want the officers to be prepared, to have thought about what it is they are presenting to us, and to have it in writing that we can look at before we come to the meeting, and then give a thorough response to what our question was. This is an overview given very kindly by the Chief Executive today of the possible areas. And I have to say, all of them look terribly interesting. And I think our difficulty going forward will be choosing what we want to do, because there is so much going on. But we will not achieve those aims by firing off a question right now about a small item that he's mentioned. So I think, unless there's more questions about, well, actually, no, I've got two questions. So I've got Councillor Haug, please, your question for the Chief Executive.
Yeah, thank you. I might get the same answer, though, but I mean, I'm happy with that. I'm just curious, because there was 4 times this term bringing together on the slides. I'm just curious in the future, so what does that mean? So why haven't these teams been together so far? So what exactly does it mean to bring these teams together? But yeah, okay, apparently it's not the question I'm supposed to ask now. It's definitely something I'll be interested in the future, so where the benefits come from it.
Go ahead, go on.
The bringing together of the teams was a core part of the redesign, and so that went through a process of debates in various committees, the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, and was agreed by Council, then was consulted on. So I think what I'm suggesting to the committee is we've got what officers have described as a more effective way of delivering services for residents. And what you may want to test is whether that is the case in reality. So I'm drawing attention particularly because there have been previous remarks about whether or not it's effective to bring together antisocial behaviour and environmental health, and so that may be an area you want to look at in more detail.
And Councillor Swift.
Thanks, Chair. Yes, I think we need reassurance about the new design, because it was presented in the justification for going over to this new design that we'd be able to, as scrutiny committee members, have a much more active role in actually formulating and constructing the ideas that we'd like to see discussed. And already it seems that we aren't able to do that because it's going on to another meeting in the future. So I think we do need reassurance that we will be able to make a positive contribution to the discussion. I thought that the whole point was that it wasn't rubber stamping according to party lines, but it was actually a more group decision that would actually be arrived at through proper scrutiny and discussion across party lines.
Thank you. Completely agree with that. Yeah. So this is a weird meeting. I mean, you know, we will have a better one the next time round, hopefully. So, any other questions for the Chief Executive? Right, at this point, we will now move on to talk about the Folk Festival specifically. But before we have the presentation from Francis Alderton, I believe that Councillor Tim Bick would like to say something. And he's online.
Can you hear me, Chair?
Yep, we can hear
Hello,
you.
You can hear me. Thank you for allowing me to speak, Chair. After the decision to cancel this year's Folk Festival, the Executive Council decided to commission a consultant's report to set out options for the future shape of the Folk Festival. I had a meeting on the 23rd of May with the Director of Communities, and he told me that the consultation report was complete and just required some questions of accuracy ironing out. And he told me that his plan going forward included scrutiny by the new Overview and Scrutiny Committee, this committee, on the 1st of July today, before the Cabinet made a decision on the 15th of July. And this meeting that I had with him was 5 weeks ago. What I would like to do is to ask why the consultant's report has not been made available for this scrutiny committee today, and why no written report has been provided for members. I understand that the chair has made clear from an early stage this was a subject requested for scrutiny, and the director clearly expected that, as he told me that was his plan 5 weeks ago. So how can members conduct serious scrutiny and make an informed recommendation to the Cabinet if they don't have access to the full information on which the decision is to be made? I understand that the consultant's report and an officer's report are going to be published for the Cabinet, but that's next Monday. None of this has been made available to this committee. This situation is rather reminiscent of what happened in January, when the cancellation of the Folk Festival this year was announced the morning after the relevant scrutiny committee had just met, circumventing a discussion at that meeting. So there is a history of evasion on this subject already, and today it just seems to be continuing. It's a far cry from the much improved advanced scrutiny that members were promised from the Council's new constitution, which I personally heard as a member of the Governance Working Party. Indeed, it actually seems to be worse than it was under the old system, when I think we could have expected the relevant scrutiny committee to have a full report and all the information before a decision was taken. It really feels to me, I'm sure there's going to be some presentation slides coming up about the Folk Festival, but it really feels to me that the absence of these written documents is really the committee being patted on the head as not mattering. And I don't really think that is what we all joined this committee, and I'm an alternate member of it. I don't think that's what we all really joined for. And so what I'm really asking is, could the officers present please explain why we're actually getting less scrutiny on this really important decision about the future of the folk festival?
Thank you, Councillor Bick. Does anyone want to? Mr. Pollock.
Thank you, Chair. I can't really comment on conversations that Councillor Bick's had with the director. I suppose what I'm aware of is that the folk festival was originally published, due to be seen by Cabinet on the 24th of June. So I'm not sure whether it's correct to say that maybe Sam was it was pushed back because the advice is still being developed. It's not been finalised. I think our Overview and Scrutiny Officer, Matt Sickley, can give you more background. I know he's been talking with you, Chair. Ultimately, if the committee wants to review an item, it needs to put it on its work programme. The advice about the folk festival has not yet been finalised, and I've made an assurance to Councillor Bick that as soon as it is finalised, we will share a copy of that with him, the Chair and the Vice Chair of the committee.
Councillor Gardner-Smith.
Thanks very much for the explanation. When you say the advice hasn't been finalised, am I right in thinking the consultant's report is finalised? And I guess the question being, therefore, why isn't the consultant's report available unless we're going to see a preview of it now?
The consultant's report does contain some confidential, commercially sensitive information. I gather there's a decision about what elements of it should or shouldn't be redacted before it's published. That would be point one. I think point two is, and I wasn't involved in the discussions around the agenda setting for this meeting. I think Matt was. I'm not aware that a request for the consultant's report was maybe part of the agenda for this meeting. If you look at the consultant's report on its own without the advice from officers, which also builds in feedback from local stakeholders, from people who've attended the folk festival and other local venues and artists, you won't be able to come to a clear view about whether or not the advice in the consultant's report is something that you would recommend or not. So it would be giving a partial view of what council officers would be recommending to the Cabinet, and we still are trying to pin that down with the Cabinet members.
Councillor Martinelli.
Thanks, Chair. I just want to make sure I'm following. If the Cabinet is next Monday, is your position that the papers, or is the Chief Exec's position that the papers will be available at some point within the next week, but not today? But because if so, doesn't that sort of undermine what we're doing here, if everything can magically become available in the brief few day periods between now and next week?
Robert.
Sorry, what's the question?
Well, how can we do scrutiny if things become unavailable for discussion, because they're going to be published 2 days before a Cabinet meeting? I don't understand how we can scrutinise anything if they're not available before a Cabinet, until 2 days before a Cabinet meeting makes a decision.
Robert.
I'm not entirely sure what the question, but I think what you're suggesting is that there's a timing issue here, and the council's chosen to have 2 scrutiny committees rather than 1. Most councils generally have a single scrutiny committee, which means that there's one which precedes every Cabinet meeting, so that you have less of these timing issues when advice is ready and when it can be shared in advance on an important decision, which the scrutiny committee may choose. It should be. I think there's a number of circumstances here which are quite challenging. We're moving to a new system, and the scrutiny committee doesn't have a work programme yet, and the advice hasn't been finalised. I think we intend to try and finalise it on Friday. We have to publish on Monday. So that it's just the nature of the circumstance. If the advice had been ready several weeks ago, the Folk Festival was on the forward plan that was published the day after the council agreed to move to a new system. And if members of this committee had decided that they wanted to do pre-scrutiny, we still wouldn't have the papers ready because we still haven't finalised the advice. We could have tried to work on a quicker timetable, but the original timetable, as I understand it, was to discuss this at a cabinet meeting on the 24th of June, but we haven't been able to finalise the advice. So it's gone to the cabinet meeting on the 15th of July, and we have to, publish advice on the next 7th of July.
Councillor Gardner-Smith.
Thanks. Look, I think we all recognise that, there are challenges moving to a new system, and, there's a lot of new things that the council needs to get to grips with very quickly. So I think we are sympathetic to that. I think the point here is that if we're to do scrutiny effectively in this committee, there needs to be some understanding, across both councillors and officers, that this committee papers will be ready in advance, so that this committee can be able to do pre-scrutiny on them. That's a responsibility on our side as well, in order to communicate early what we want to see on the forward plan. There's also, I think, should be an expectation amongst officers who know that this is a controversial issue, likely to be one that many members will want to take a look at before it goes to a cabinet for decision. There should be an expectation built in, I think, in terms of planning and preparation of papers, that these sorts of items will come to scrutiny, and I hope, therefore, we won't be in the same situation in future.
Any other comments? Councillor Bajan.
And I suppose I'm going to be sounding like a cracked record, aren't I? I had a chat with the officer responsible for this on the 23rd of June in the rehearsal that we had, and we had quite a hard conversation. And it's unfortunate that he's not here because we'd have another hard one in public. This paper should be available. It shouldn't be that we couldn't get it done. We lost the Folk Festival this year because officers never passed information to executive councillors that they were cancelling the Folk Festival. And everybody found themselves embarrassed because it was then too late to have a folk festival. So I would have thought that officers would have been a bit more aware of how interested we will be on this particular topic. We've had the very difficult situation of having a folk festival cancelled because of a glitch. Let's put it like that. I don't want to be any more public than that. But we're sitting here today discussing why the papers are not ready without having a proper answer. If you don't have enough staff to do it, then perhaps people ought to talk to us about that, and we'll have to see what else we can cut to get more staff. Or if the officers are not able to do that report, why can't they do the report? I spoke to the head of this report on the 23rd of June in an informal but meeting that was called, and I made it very clear how unhappy I was. I would have thought that report would have been here today. I really can't understand why it's not. We can always say, well, we just didn't get it done on time. As I said, we're going to have some hard conversations, aren't we? We're going to have to be very clear. We've all come tonight, and there's 3 officers here, I think, reporting to us. I really don't believe this is right or good enough.
Okay, well, I think the sentiment in the committee is very clear. It's something that we are going to have to make sure works more smoothly and doesn't happen again in the future. I think you've probably heard that. I would urge everyone to realise that this is part of a transition, and everyone is learning, and I know that officers have worked very hard. So with that, perhaps we can move on to the presentation. Francis. Oh, yep.
Thank you, Chair. I had one thing, which is that we have come here today, and Frances is going to present an update. And I think we would welcome any feedback that this committee has. She's going to go into some details, including on the key principles that have been used to try and set the context for the review of the Folk Festival. Anything you provide, we can also reference in the papers that we are finalising. I'm sorry that we haven't been able to work to your agenda on the first, and I wasn't involved in the agenda setting, so I'm here as a substitute. But my understanding was that there was an agreement that we weren't in a position to provide papers, and that the advice hasn't been finalised. When it is finalised, it will be published on Monday, and if on reading the advice, any members of this committee have points, suggestions, recommendations, Francis and I would be very happy to take them and feed them into the Cabinet as a short note to say we've had this from the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. I know that won't make up for, I feel, the disappointment in the room, but it's the best we can do under the circumstances, so I hope we can appreciate we're doing our best.
Okay, thank you. Francis.
Okay. So this is a set of slides to update on our progress and the process of review so far on the Folk Festival review. And again, just to reiterate what Robert has said, we are really keen within this scrutiny process to listen and consider all your feedback on the way forward, and we can feed that into the Cabinet process and onwards throughout the whole year as we go through the next 12 months.
You put it on the display. Press that thing there. Get it on full display.
Okay, so process to date. We were asked to undertake a review following the January committee. The parameters of this were outlined in an agreed scoping document with principles including exploration of cost neutrality, exploration of a wide variety of formats and provision of resource for the review. Independent consultants called Counterculture were appointed, and they were asked to explore a wide variety of options of delivering the Folk Festival, and that included looking at differing scales, different formats, delivery models, greenfield sites versus multi-venue ideas were all explored and included in their scoping brief. Stakeholder engagement was also undertaken. So we had the consultants review, but on top of that work, the team within the council did an extensive piece of work around consulting with local stakeholders, including the folk clubs, including our own staff, including festival staff and different partners, stakeholders, etc., and also audiences that were present in 2024, but also audiences that weren't present in 2024 to see why they hadn't come and what they wanted to see in the future. Local promoters were also included, and industry experts were consulted for peer feedback. So that included venue promoters, festival managers, and other professional staff across the UK, but also locally as well. So, work to date. With the review from Counterculture and the other information that we gathered, we then did some work on undertaking stress tests on some of the findings that we found. And we stress tested all of the various different suggestions in terms of new formats and different ways of delivery against Cambridge City Council's values, but also Cambridge City Council's financial capability, the cultural strategy objectives, And we also did some detailed risk analysis through our risk frameworks, and that included not just financial risk, but reputational risk and health and safety risk. So in terms of financial viability, as we have experienced in 2024, but like so many other festivals, the outdoor festival environment at the moment is tough, and this is why that we needed to have a review. The consultant's brief was to explore an option of a traditional greenfield site festival on a cost-neutral basis, but it's very, very difficult to make that work on a cost-neutral basis. And with that in mind, that would have exposed the council to significant financial risk. And in 2024, we saw that that was the case. And maintaining the existing model would risk significant subsidy and commitment from the council. So, with all of our provision across cultural services in all the different events we do, we always need to review, we always need to evolve and stay relevant and accessible. Any event needs to continue to review and improve irrespective of any financial challenges in order to have a resilient future. So this period has been an opportunity to have time to explore other initiatives and options in order to strengthen our inclusion commitment, our modernisation and our collaboration objectives, all of which are in the cultural strategy. So even without these financial challenges that we had in 2024 and across the UK as a whole, the whole festival industry has had those financial challenges, we would have needed to have done a review anyway in order to future-proof our model so that it's resilient for the future and so that we can reach the new audiences and the younger audiences that we need to gain in order to keep it going. Again, as with every event that we deliver and that we want to help support and promote, we want, and it is important to us, that we want to align with the cultural strategy and the corporate plan. So that includes the general principles around supporting creators, creating and supporting a thriving economy, local youth development, community cohesion, financial prudence, cultural equity, and addressing inequality. And so with those principles in mind, again, as we've said at the beginning, we would really welcome your view on those principles to help us guide and help us in our future planning for any future folk festival format and for our events as a whole. So the timeframe and decision-making process is that we're continuing to work up the guidance for the Cabinet paper. Cabinet, as we've said before, is the 15th of July, and the likely decision-making there through that Cabinet paper will be an ask to agree to the continuation of the Folk Festival in 2026 with some more detailed outline of the format and an acknowledgement of the financial requirements that may need to be asked for 2026 initially in order to invest and underwrite in the first year so that it has a kickstart to any new format that might be proposed. If the decision is that the Folk Festival continues in whatever format is proposed and agreed, we would like to start programming immediately, and that is obviously because we need as much time as possible to make it as financially successful as we want it to be, but also so that we communicate clearly and constructively with our supporters, partners, sponsors and audience members. And the last point really is there will be, we hope that there will be an opportunity for Scrutiny in February 2026 to review this process if that's what you'd like to see. And we will also obviously be evaluating any process and any progress of any event that's agreed throughout the whole year and come back with our findings from the Folk in the City 2025 event, but also any future model that's proposed for 2026.
Okay, thank you, Francis. Does anyone have any questions? Councillor Divkovic.
Yep. You said that you looked at whether you could find a cost neutral basis for using the green space. You said you weren't able to do that. Could you explain why that is, and just elaborate on that a bit?
In order to try and recreate the Folk Festival in its traditional format in a green space, as a festival weekend with tickets and camping and 3, 4, 5 different stages and a good programme across the whole site, that is financially challenging. And that's been financially challenging for many, many festivals across the UK. And some of the reasons for that have been because infrastructure costs have risen dramatically, particularly after COVID, but it's not just because of COVID. Inflation within the festival industry, particularly in infrastructure, has risen between 30 to 60% in certain types of the infrastructure that we need. So if we've got those additional costs rising, and we want to maintain the festival as an inclusive festival with a palatable ticket price, that's an extremely challenging financial situation to be in. And if we reduce the infrastructure, that can have a knock-on effect in terms of reducing the programme, and thereby, in some respects, you're reducing the attractiveness to people buying tickets who are still being asked to buy the tickets at the same price or a higher price. So it's a very difficult dilemma in terms of financial viability and how that's affected by the scale of the format within a festival.
Councillor Houck.
Thank you, Chair. I would just like to suggest or float the idea that this, any future plans could make more use of currently or so far neglected spaces around Cambridge. I mean, I'm thinking, of course, of places like Hobson Square and Trumpington. These are not just fringe areas of Cambridge. I mean, these are big communities that have been waiting for a long time to make use of these spaces. And maybe one could even encourage these local communities to organize their own events, local bands, maybe give them an incentive, helping them organizing and waive fees, for this particular event. And I think this would go down very well with these communities. Thank you.
Ed?
Yes, agree. I mean, that's been part of the discussions as part of the review. So it's how we make the any future format more inclusive.
Councillor Smith. Swift, sorry.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I was just looking at this thing of Robert Plant, who appeared last year. And I mean, personally, this is just what I think. It's a folk festival, and I'd be very happy if it actually didn't have...
Listen to Richard Swift, because he reckons he's got something positive to say. But
sounds like Rachel. Hey, Rachel, I can hear you. I was just thinking about the Robert Plant, that actually it's a folk festival, and sort of mega rock stars actually are probably very expensive, and it would be, in my opinion, better to actually go back to its roots as folk, local young groups actually appearing, to be much cheaper and more in spirit with a folk festival rather than an international sort of rock type format. Thank you.
Francis?
Yes, thank you for your comments. We will definitely feed that into the report, and we will feed back our findings from our local promotions this year within Folk in the City, which did focus on local promotions.
Councillor Gardner-Smith.
Thank you. Having started off negatively, you know, and having a bit of a moan about this committee, I do just want to start by saying thank you, because I understand there's been a huge amount of work done on this. And, you know, it's clear that there has been really extensive consultation. And I think that is something that I would imagine most of us will agree is vital if we're to take a decision about you know, the future of the folk festivals. So thank you for all the work that's been done. I've got a couple of questions. One is around, we're picking up on Councillor Divkovich's question around cost neutrality and the risks to the council. You mentioned in your report that there is a potential risk liability to the council of around £550,000 in maintaining the sort of the festival in its current format. I note that I think in the previous folk festival there was a loss made of 320 or 350. I can't remember the exact figure. So I just wonder whether you can explain the estimated rise. That's quite a significant rise in terms of the estimated loss that the council would make if it maintains that as sort of around 60%, where that's coming from. The second point I wanted to ask, well, just mention as you ask about the principles, I think clearly inclusivity is something that, you know, I would certainly want the council to be championing very heavily in terms of its thinking around the future of the folk festival, and I'm pleased to see that in, and I wonder whether you can say more about that in terms of the sort of evolution of the thinking and the consultants' report.
Okay, you mentioned there's a difference between the figures between our loss in 24 and what we estimate could be a potential loss if we continued as we were. Some of the reasons for that is that costs are continuing to go up in terms of infrastructure. It is an issue across the UK with many festival managers and directors. Alongside that, if we want to make an offer that's inclusive to as many people as possible, we can't increase the ticket price again and again and again and again. So there's that gap will get bigger and bigger if we want to protect accessible ticket pricing. And at the moment we are also already, in 2024, we're already at the high point in terms of festival ticket pricing. We're already at a higher point, so it's difficult to increase that price anymore. And in terms of inclusivity, we've always been keen to have an inclusive festival, like we are with all of our events. They need to be inclusive. It's one of the objectives of the cultural strategy and the objectives of the City Council's corporate objectives. So that's what we work to. And some of the ways that we try and achieve that is by working with local partners. For example, Cambridge Summer School, which encourages local emerging musicians and local young people into the music scene. And one of the things that we would like to be able to progress is investing more into the local scene so that we can give opportunities for young people to enter the music industry and support them, not just at the event, but give them a longer lead-in time through some of the work that we do in partnership with local venues, local promoters, and some of the local schools. So we would really like that to be part of any future proposal.
Councillor Glassbeck.
Thank you, yes. As someone who has attended the Folk Festival on several occasions and really enjoyed it, I feel that there is a loss in this, and I think a lot of the people, you know, who were very disappointed this year were feeling that loss. But actually listening to what you're saying and thinking about the issues, I'm actually feeling that there could be a lot of benefits in changing. We do have to move on and look at different situations. I think one of the reasons that you told us before that this was not, people were not buying tickets this year was because obviously of economic hardship. A lot of people are struggling, and smaller, more local events could help to make it more inclusive and diverse, I think. And that would also, as you've said, enable more local groups to get involved in this and take part. I think, again, going back to what Councillor Houck said, we do have quite a lot of venues around here, local venues that could be used and which would engage local people more. I mean, I know that the event that's going on, well, that's going to happen at the Museum of Technology, I understand that the tickets are selling really well for that. And that is a perfect venue for something like this. It's already set up. You've said that infrastructure costs were very high for these events, but that is already set up. Things, for example, Stourbridge Common is also very nearby if you wanted to extend it to somewhere that people can camp as well, without it being hugely expensive. So I think that these are all considerations that, you know, we are taking into account now. And I think it's probably quite a good thing that we are having to rethink it, because I know that it has huge economic benefit to the City Council as it is, well, for other people in the city, maybe not to the council itself. But I think that this could also bring economic benefits to wider areas of the city. So I would really support some changes being made. Thank you.
Councillor Bagent.
Thank you, Chair. I thought the consultant's role was to do a cost-neutral consultancy and come up with a cost-neutral answer. So, by the way that you're talking, without having the benefit of seeing that report, it looks like they failed. So first question is, I suppose, as we're a scrutiny committee, we'll be paying them because they didn't do what they were told to do. So that's probably the first thing. I don't know how much we paid them, but I guess that's a secret. But I guess it was being a lot of money, because it sounds like they did quite an extensive survey, but they didn't produce what we asked them to produce. I've listened to you, and you've talked about a lot of things, which has all been about widening the brief, so making it more expensive. The brief was about the folk festival, not about the cultural arrangements for Cambridge City, as I understand it. And now we're talking about events in other places, which I'm not against doing, but that isn't the focus, or what the focus should be. We should be talking about the folk festival. If it's not a good idea, then somebody needs to say that. I don't think we asked for people to look at other ideas. I don't do festivals, but if I did, it would be for the ambience, it would be for the togetherness amongst like-minded people, all singing along and having a jolly time, almost sitting around campfires, I suppose. Because a lot of people do camp, don't they? They go down there and they make a week of it, or whatever it is that goes on. So we had a very successful event in regards to that sort of ambience, because by the crowds of cars that were parking on the suburbs of Romsey and camping right on the edge of Romsey, there was a lot of people who loved it, and they came from all over the country, I understand. So I'm a bit confused about if we've lost what the brief was. The brief was here. What about the folk festival? And now we're talking about fringe events. Great, do that as another thing. But that isn't the folk festival. I'd like to see the data. There clearly was a lot of data collected, because you've spoken about talking to people, going all over the country, talking to other people. I'd like to see the data for that. I don't see why we shouldn't be able to see it. We'd do it confidentially, of course, but I'd just like to see the raw data that the report was made on. So what did the consultant see as the areas, I've written this question down while you were talking, where we would lose money? Did they tell us, oh, you're going to lose money on that bit? Or did they just say, whatever, I don't know what they said, because we haven't seen the report. I'm, like my colleague here, I suspect that, I got this name right, we wouldn't be inviting Kneecap because he'd be too expensive. And I think that's a great idea, that we should be looking to local talent. Cambridge is full of talent. Cambridgeshire is full of talent. I'm sure the world's full of talent, of people who would probably come and pay us to perform. And I'm sure that the audiences that would come to see that would come to see that raw talent, because it's about the ambience. I watched that, what's that festival that's just gone on? Glastonbury, that's it. Thank you. You know, I watched that. It looks very exciting. It didn't rain this time, did it? But there's a number of questions in that, but my number one question is, why have they widened? Why is the brief being widened? That wasn't the task that was set. And secondly, why are we not talking about a cost-neutral outcome? Because that was the brief, because you wrote it up there. Thank you.
Francis.
I suppose I'll just make one very general point. The brief to the consultants was to explore cost-neutral options, but it was also to explore a wide variety of different formats that the Folk Festival could take in the future. And that includes greenfield sites, it could include venues, it could include city centre-based options. So that's what they're asked to do. And in terms of cost-neutral, you can offer a cost-neutral option, but it's whether it comes with such high ambitious assumptions in terms of the budget, and whether you're prepared to take that financial risk on such a high assumption on ticket sales, etc. So you can have a cost-neutral budget, but at the same time you need your budgets to be financially prudent and realistic.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Pounds.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to let you know that as part of my mayor's events, and along with Councillor Swift, we will be attending all the music in the parks and all the folk festival events that are going on this summer. So I went to Nightingale Park on Sunday, and it was a fabulous event. Really enjoyed, really well attended, really enjoyed by families. Good for local business. Jack's Gelatos was doing a roaring trade. So we'll be able to sort of feed back to you just how these events are going down, and which music is appealing to people. And certainly the choir and the music that was there on Sunday was very, very popular, very, very, very enjoyable.
Thank you. Councillor Glassbeck.
Yes, I mean, I'd just like to say that it doesn't seem to me that having changing the format of the folk festival to being events in different places means that it can't still be a folk festival. For example, we have Cambridge Literary Festival, which is incredibly successful and takes place in lots of different venues. And people don't see that as less of a literary festival because it's not all happening in one place. And basically, as regards the consultants, basically, if the figures don't add up for continuing the folk festival in its present form, what do we want them to do? I mean, it seems to me that, you know, they have come up with suggestions that might work as an alternative.
Thank you. Councillor Houck.
Thank you. Yes, I think in the previous report about the cancellation, the folk festival, the number, we heard that the local economy lost £2 million due to the cancellation of the folk festival. I'm pretty sure that was the number in the report. So will you have numbers for the proposals that are currently being discussed as well? I mean, at least estimates for what's in it for the local economy, impact on local economy, because we haven't really heard many details about the proposals yet that are on the table, but will that be part of the consideration as well?
Francis.
We will have data built on 2024 festival, but also data from the Folk in the City 25 festival. Whatever option is brought into the Cabinet paper as a recommendation, we will make estimates on the benefits to the city of those different options within that paper. And then any agreement for a festival in the future will obviously have an evaluation and impact assessment attached to the work that we do throughout the year.
Do you want to come back on that?
if I may, Chair, I think it was £2.4 million is the economic benefit. So that was done based on an evaluation several years ago. To put that into context, just the businesses that are registered in Cambridge that have over 50 staff, the annual turnover in terms of gross value added is £60 billion. So I wouldn't want to over-egg the economic benefits of a festival that the council puts on. It's really important to a number of local venues, to pubs, to people who come and camp. Camping has been mentioned a couple of times. We've really struggled to get people to come and camp. People just haven't wanted to do it. And that we've lost the biggest amount of ticket revenue from people not wanting to. It's not Glastonbury. So they'll come for a night and they'll go home. But that, you know, so we've provided some quite high quality infrastructure that people no longer want to take advantage of, and that's part of the challenge in future.
Thank you. Councillor Martinelli.
Thank you, Chair. So thank you for the presentation. I think we got quite a high-level overview of what the possibilities are here. So I guess I had a couple of questions. The first is obviously a lot of the calculations, I presume, have already been done. So I guess my first question is, what are we waiting on that will inform the officer recommendation that will appear between now and the 15th of July, or a bit before the 15th of July? What's missing from what information you have at the moment? And the second is a bit more about the options. So presumably there will be a recommendation, but there will be options around that. And are you anticipating that the options will be continue with some risk, reformat with some satellite events, or cancel doing everything completely, and kind of options within that, you know, about the exact format of option B, for example, or will it be less granular than that and more delegated to officers to decide on an exact format at a later date?
Francis.
Well, we're still working on the development of the Cabinet paper, and we're still doing risk assessments on all of the data that we've collected. So all of that information will be in that paper and available on Monday when it's published.
Sorry, and the question was also about the options that are going to be in that paper. Is it as Councillor Martinelli has described?
I suppose those that they haven't been clarified yet, and they haven't been confirmed yet. So, and that's still the work that we're doing at the moment.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Gardner-Smith.
Sorry, Councillor Hawke answered my question. So.
Okay, so Councillor Divkovic.
I think one of the main concerns, as a stakeholder, with making the decision or having an opinion on the folk festival, is the fact that a lot of people do like the camping element, in terms of the structure and how the folk festival traditionally is, and so they're reluctant to move away from the traditional way of doing it. However, the information that Robert just helpfully provided now, which was actually people don't really want to camp, I think having that in the slides and having that information will probably help us make the decision. That wasn't really given to us, and I think that having more details on that would actually be quite helpful in the future.
Thank you. Has anyone got any other questions?
Just to confirm, that information was, I think, in reports that we provided in December or January. There was a large detailed update review which gave ticketing information, including camping and uptake. So I think we could recirculate that if it's helpful.
Yeah, I think it probably would be. So I'll just ask my question, which no one else has asked yet. What is driving? We've heard sort of hints about comments from other people that there's economic hardship. So what is driving the reduction in attendees? Some people don't want to camp, but is that the answer, that it's economic hardship? Because obviously we have a choice, right? If costs go up, we can raise our prices. So you've said that we don't want to raise our prices because that's then not inclusive. But the other issue around income is a lack of people coming or wanting to come. And part of the reason is apparently that the fact that Latitude moved their time for their festival to the same weekend as ours, at the last weekend in July. So if we moved it to another weekend, would our income go back up again? So some detail about why there is a decline of the number of people coming would be quite helpful.
I think it's quite a complex picture when you try and analyse all of the reasons why the success of a festival changes over time. I think one reason is economic hardship, and so in some of the surveys that we did on the 2024 festival included economic hardship. It also referenced the lineup for that particular year of the Folk Festival in 2024, and other events were also a factor that was stated in the feedback that we got. So those three things are significant, but I think there are lots of many other factors that play a part in terms of audience behaviour, in terms of accommodation, the age of the audience, and the fact that we've got an ageing audience, which means that their behaviour changes and their tastes change. And increased competition from other events.
Robert, go ahead.
All right, Chair. I think, again, provided in the report in January, there was quite a clear overview of the structure of the festival market in the UK. And just in the last year, it flagged that, scores of festivals had either paused or cancelled or gone out of business, and it indicated that from the insight that Francis and her team had, that we were expecting more festivals this year to announce that they were folding or pausing. So there's nothing particularly unique about what's specifically happening to the Folk Festival. Across the country, the sector is under an extreme amount of pressure. And the more festivals that fold, the more companies that provide the infrastructure fold, the less availability there is of said infrastructure, and the cost increases as supply diminishes. So there's a bit of an economic reality here that is the bigger picture contest. It's not necessarily all to do with how we've arranged, managed and run the Folk Festival. And some really quite important WOMAD has folded. It's a global music festival that's had a tradition a bit like the Folk Festival. It's got lots of backers, it's got philanthropists behind it, but it wasn't able to break even, and it's now closed. So this is just the reality of the situation we face.
Thank you. So can I just ask a follow-on question, then maybe you can answer at the same time. So if we have these factors that have affected our open and green space venue, one of my questions is, well, how does the alternative options address that problem? Because if people are not coming because they don't like the music, or they're getting too old to come, then that's not going to be solved by putting it somewhere else.
I think going back to one of the points we said earlier around the need to, even if we hadn't have had a financial challenge in 2024, we would have still have needed to have done a full review. If you continue to deliver year on year, you never get the time to do a proper full review, and this year has allowed us to do that, because you constantly need to reinvest in your marketing and data analysis in order to make sure that you're targeting the right people and changing the programme to suit demand. So, yeah. And the other point I wanted to make is the Association of Independent Festivals has been a really key organisation across the country in the UK in terms of supplying data on the health of outdoor festival industry at the moment, and that data has been really useful to us.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Glassberg, and I think after this maybe, all right, Councillor Swift, but then I think we need to draw this to a close.
Yeah, this is just a very quick point, which actually relates not just to the folk festival, but to this committee as a whole and the issues that I think are around it. There are some problems, I think, because the office, as the officers have said, they did produce a report on this, a very detailed report. And those of us who are members of the Environment and Community Scrutiny Committee heard all that in great detail. So, you know, we understand these issues about the folk festival in a way that most people are now coming new to it in this committee. And that is obviously going to be true for me, for example, when we're looking at things to do with housing or transport. And I just wonder how we can really have detailed scrutiny of these things when we have all going to have very different kind of experiences and what we already know about these issues.
Okay, well, I mean, we all have to bring our own expertise, and then it's up to us, it's our responsibility to get to grips with those, the new issues,
Chair,
right?
can I just say, Chair, that it actually doesn't seem to me very time efficient, because we've now spent over an hour talking about the folk festival, and we spent at least 2 hours talking about it at Environment and Community Scrutiny meeting. So, and the same issues and the same points were raised.
Well, we're a new committee, we're new people here. There's going to be an inevitable learning curve, I believe. Right, finally, Councillor Swift.
Oh, thanks, Chair. I'd just like to ask how much the full ticket in 2024 was for an individual and a family, because I'm not even sure how much it cost. Thank you.
Francis, do you know off the top of your head?
I think it was 230, but I will double check that figure. Yeah. Including camping, but I will check that figure.
For the day or for the week, the whole thing?
For the weekend.
Okay, well, thank you for everyone's comments. You know, part of our function is to provide recommendations to Cabinet. And so I'm just going to say what I heard, and please kind of chip in and think, let me know whether you agree. So we thought it would be better to have more folk rather than any other kind of music. We recommended local talent to come, and that would be really popular. We sort of acknowledge the fact that if a single greenfield site is not going to make money, that is not something that we really would recommend to Cabinet to continue, and that we would, if there is sort of the multi-event is recommended, then we've got lots of places within the city. So the museum was mentioned, I think some common, I didn't catch the beginning of it. Stourbridge Common.
Sorry, Stourbridge Common for camping, but there's also Cambridge United, for example, right next to it.
Right, so there's lots of places. Yep, Coldham's Common. So we are kind of recommending that a broad spread of venues be used and try and involve communities in those locations. Have I missed anything? Would anyone like to add anything else that we would recommend to Cabinet?
Or just the point about inclusivity, making sure that it's, you know, that's a primary consideration.
Yep, Councillor Beatty.
One last point, I suppose. I suppose Cabinet have to consider whether this is just money that we can't afford to spend. And I think that's an important consideration that should be there all the time. If it's going to be a loss of £500,000, then I suspect we're not only doing it for our population, it's a lot of the people coming here will be subsidised by us if we're going to lose £500,000 on this. So I suppose Cabinet do have to consider, well, we'll just cancel it if it, you know, because we've spent a lot of money getting to this point. We spent a lot of money just sitting here tonight.
Councillor Martinelli.
Thank you. I agree with the high-level recommendations and summary of discussion. I would personally feel quite uncomfortable about us recommending or seeming to recommend a specific option, e.g. the satellite events, in the absence of having had a report and having seen the financials around that. So I think the inclusivity and supporting local talent, those are all broad-level principles I think we all support, but I think we can't take a position on a specific option when we haven't seen what the options are.
No, agree. I mean, I said if the option B, your option B, was multi locations, that we were recommending a very wide variety of them, if that's the option that's recommended. Yeah? Anything else? Right, well, I'd like to thank officers for attending. It's been quite a contentious item, so thank you very much. It's been a lot of hard work, and clearly some more to do. And that's finished with that item. And since the next item, we don't have an update on this anymore, I believe that's the end of this meeting. Oh, no, it's not. Goodness. Oh, sorry. Item 8. I need to turn the page over. Okay, so this is an opportunity to discuss the forward plan and our work programme. So we have a report for this item. So I'm handing over to Matt to present it to us.
Thank you, Chair. This is an item that is almost exactly the same as was presented to the Performance Overview and Scrutiny Committee last month. The only change within it is that the forward plan has since been updated and the work programme document has since been updated, and I think one reference to both in the report itself has been updated. I won't read through the report because members have obviously had a chance to look at it. It consolidates some of the points around the legal basis for overview and scrutiny in local authorities, some of the, I suppose, culture that Cambridge has around its overview and scrutiny, and I suppose what we might call the emerging culture as well. It's been really helpful to meet with the chairs and vice chairs of the two overview and scrutiny committees and with officers and other members as part of, I suppose, supporting you moving into these new scrutiny arrangements. In setting your work programme, you can have regard for the Cabinet Forward Plan, but the Cabinet Forward Plan is a slightly more narrow document than you might want to create with your work programme. So the Cabinet Forward Plan will list items that Cabinet will take decisions on. You as an Overview and Scrutiny Committee can say that you are interested in some or all or none of that, but you can also be interested in things outside of what Cabinet might be taking a decision on. And that's why there are two separate documents. You have the beginnings of a work programme for your committee. It is rightly at this point shorter than the Performance Overview and Scrutiny Committee because they have already had their first meeting and discussions off the back of that. So I would expect that by the time you next meet, you would have a probably slightly longer and a bit, I suppose, a bit more structured work programme. And I've already been taking some notes on points that have been raised tonight that you might want to consider. I suppose the only bit of advice I would give you that I can't recall if I've put in the report or not is that in my experience, less is more with scrutiny. If you want to really get your teeth into an issue, you want to revisit it beginning, middle and end, and you want to get down into the detail and figure out whether something has gone well or has gone poorly, then you would be well advised to give yourself the time and space to do that. In other words, if you create lots of agendas for your meetings that each have 8, 9, 10 items on, you're not going to spend much time on each item, and you're probably going to feel like you haven't, at the end of the year, done much real scrutiny. You've probably just skimmed the surface of a few things. So I would suggest pick your battles. The trickiest job belongs to the chair and vice chair because they, to a degree, hold the pen on your agendas. So you can come to them with 1,000 ideas and suggestions. They will at times perhaps need to say no to you and to say that, you know, there are other members and more other members who want to look at other items as well. Something that I think you will end up with through this year is some kind of tool or some kind of basis on which you decide as a committee how to prioritise what goes on your agenda. That's something that came up at the first Performance and Overview and Scrutiny Committee. It's something that's been talked about in passing for this committee. What I would say to you is don't rush into coming up with some prioritisation tool. Give yourself a couple of meetings to get a feel for what are the things that are interesting to you, what are the areas that you think need focus. And if you can, I would hold off until the new performance management framework is in place, because the idea of that is that all members will have effectively a dashboard in front of them that will flash up things that are going especially well and especially poorly. And that probably brings me, Chair, to my final point, which is that overview and scrutiny is a very effective way of looking at things that are going wrong or have gone wrong and looking at how you can improve them in future. But you should also consider the things that are going really well in Cambridge City Council, because there's, we would hope that there's good learning that can be taken from those and relayed more widely across the organisation. So don't just see yourself as a negative tool. I certainly don't. Officers across the authority certainly don't. So you can be as optimistic as you are pessimistic. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Matt.
The thing that niggles in the back of my head is that if we pick certain issues to tunnel in on, a lot of other stuff gets missed. And your experience on how often does that happen? How much in other councils have they missed important issues? Because it's all very well to spend an hour talking about the folk festival, which was perhaps necessary. But if we can't afford to do that too often in a meeting that only lasts 3 hours at max, and how many of the little things need scrutinising as well? And how do you bring them to this meeting? So if I want to talk about blue bins, that's not something we want to do deep tunnelling on perhaps, but we might want to talk a bit about blue bins for half an hour and see how that's going. I don't want to talk about blue bins.
Thanks, Chair. I think it's a bit of a harsh reality. The LGA has a figure, I can't remember it, it's 700 and something. And they quote that figure as the number of different things that local authorities do in the country. So you will inevitably feel like at times, have we got a watching brief on all of our things? You have 2 overview and scrutiny committees here, so that's in a way quite helpful to you, because you can kind of carve the organisation down the middle and say, well, we're going to worry about this half, and Councillor Porra and her team are going to worry about the other half, and there might be the odd unlucky councillor like yourself who sits on both. In my experience, when you have members who are tuned into the organisation, who are enthusiastic and who are in touch with residents, other organisations and so on, not much does get missed. You know infinitely better than me what is important to Cambridge City. You'll bring your own, I suppose, political views to that, but you are also representatives of the city. And I've not yet come across a single member here who doesn't strike me as someone who, and particularly in the overview and scrutiny committees, doesn't strike me as someone who gets what's important to them. I think you've also got a nice balance across both committees of members who have different backgrounds and different interests. So where one council might be super interested in blue bins, another might be much more interested in housing and not have that much of an interest in blue bins, I suppose, which is almost inconceivable. The other point I would say is that overview and scrutiny committee is one place that overview and scrutiny can happen. It can actually happen in other places. You have cabinet members, they have portfolios, you are a committee that as a collective can hold them to account, but it doesn't preclude you from going directly to a cabinet member and asking them to explain a particular decision that they have taken, even if your committee isn't looking at it. You have meetings of full council as well, where motions can be tabled, passed, debated, amended. And then you also have the kind of, what I would almost call the operational scrutiny that comes by having an officer corps who exists to carry out the job day to day and can answer and will answer your questions about the kind of more routine matters that maybe don't merit a slot on the overview and scrutiny committee, but nonetheless you think are interesting, you want an answer to. So I would say it's easy, I've been in that position, it's easy to become worried about feeling like things are missed, but providing you have this item on your agenda at every meeting, which constitutionally you will do, you know that at the very least at every one of your committee meetings, you're going to look at your work plan, you're going to look at the forward plan, and you've got a chance to reassess things, reprioritise things, take this off, add this on, bring this forward, shove this back, very regularly. The final thing I might just say on that, Chair, is that it's been really helpful. We've already had one meeting of this, but the 2 chairs, vice chairs and officers are having a monthly meeting, a standing meeting, at which we do a bit of triage between the committees, make sure nothing is falling between the gaps between the 2 committees, and can share what's going well, what isn't going so well, what are we going to be focusing on going forward. And I think that's going to be a very helpful way as well to funnel some of that stuff, I suppose, and make sure that things are on the agenda that ought to be. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, so any question or any points to think about on the forward plan? Are there any items there that you think would be interesting for us to look at? I would add to what's just been said as well that I think we haven't had our update because the Office of Consent was called away. We've had one update on the communities, a very brief one. I think it's up to us all to think about what's going on in those departments that we cover and come up with ideas for what we think are important. I don't anticipate that we'll come to a final decision today. I think we've had a lot of information thrown at us. We don't have all the information that we want. And so I think what we're looking for now at this point is just an indication of what you think might be interesting for us to be looking at and put on the agenda. So, yeah, any comments from anyone? Divkovic.
I think this one goes without saying, the Cambridge Civic Quarter project update. I think that one.
Yep, that's very interesting, but I'm afraid it's not on our committee. Sorry, it's hard. You have to look at the final column and it has to say services, climate and communities. Yeah.
If I may, it's on the performance assets and scrutiny agenda though. So again, Jenny, Councillor Gawthorpe and myself welcome any feedback from any members if you've got comments once that's published though.
So in the absence of anyone else saying, oh, sorry, Councillor Gardner-Smith.
Well, you can go first if you want, yeah.
Okay, so I reckon that the items that we should be perhaps putting on our work programme is the leisure management contract. I think that's quite a large part of our activities for this council, and therefore quite significant. And then the other one I would suggest is the climate change strategy. Councillor Gardner-Smith.
Yes, and I was going to say on the climate change strategy, in the draft forward plan here for this committee, it suggests we might look at that in February of next year. My sense is we might want to have an update on either an update on the existing climate change strategy before then, so that will help enable us to, effectively scrutinise whatever draft strategy comes forward in February, if that's the earliest it's available. I do have a couple of other points, if I may. Thinking about the other role of this committee, which is not to do pre-scrutiny or but post-scrutiny. I noted that the community wealth building strategy was on the presentation given earlier. I think that will be 1 year. It's now 1 year since that was introduced. It could be something we wanted to look at as a committee in terms of progress being made. And then the other item I think we've discussed is thinking about the impact of the transformation plan on the areas that this committee scrutinises, and looking at performance. And I note that there will be a new performance management framework coming forward as well. So looking at performance in relation to the transformation. And how that has impacted performance, hopefully positively.
Yes, so Councillor Houck and then Pounds.
Thank you. Just in the context of the climate change strategy, I would be very interested in more information about the heat network when it's available, which I think will be a huge project around Cambridge, financially as well as with respect to impact while it's being created, so on and so forth. I was also wondering if there are any plans currently to make any use of these action groups that apparently we can create. I don't know if I'm using the right term here, but we could potentially have subgroups and to working groups. Thank you.
Okay, before I come to Councillor Pounds, just on those task and finish work groups, I think we need to find our feet first and wait until we do one of those. I think we all need to have a very good overview of what we want to look at, the scale of it, and then decide, what's really worth a lot of more work.
Just I think it will still be good to know how we are going to make this decision so everybody knows what to think about. But anyway, I realize that this will be part of the future thinking process.
Councillor Pounds.
Oh yes, just to let you know that there's quite a detailed report about the leisure facilities in the last Environment and Scrutiny Committee minutes, including the reasons why they went for outsourcing.
Okay. Councillor Divkovic.
Just to add to Councillor Hulk's suggestion about the working groups, I know obviously this is early stages and we're still teething into it, but obviously I'm on the CPCA overview and scrutiny, so, well I was, now I'm on audit and governance, but we had rapporteurs as well, but so that's something to think about or to consider, but I think if we do consider it, I think we should frame it really well and in terms of the roles and what the expectations are and things like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, yeah. Councillor Bajan.
Chair, I think the next meeting is scheduled to take place during the Labour Party conference.
That should definitely not be happening. Are you
No.
sure? The 30th of September?
Are we right?
I thought so.
Could we just check that?
Yeah.
Because if that is so, then we need to move it. Not the conference, that is.
Yeah, agreed. It is? I think so, yeah. Right. Okay, yeah, well then we do need to move it. Councillor Porra, I think you said.
Just to note, the District Heat Network is currently sitting under the committee that I chair, but it's an interesting one because it spans both. So I think that might be something for chairs and vice chairs to have a chat about, because it will be interesting when it comes forward, whether it's the financial implications we need to scrutinise versus obviously the net zero. So I think we're going to find a few more of these issues in housing as well, where we span both committees. So I'm very happy to work with chair and vice chair and my vice chair to work out so we don't duplicate work for us and for officers. Thank you.
Indeed. Okay, yeah, so I mean, I thought some of the stuff that Robert Pollock was presenting as well, things that are going on in that communities team were also very interesting. But I'm finding it very difficult to assess the relative merits of them without a little bit more information. So I think Councillor Gardner-Smith and I are going to be sitting down with the various heads of departments, and we'll think about a way of understanding what's going on in those departments and then communicating with you, and then we can have a process maybe to try and decide what we need to look at. Because the other thing that you know, the KPIs and the performance management is all being redesigned at the moment. So it's a bit difficult for us to be making decisions about all of that before those are ready. The other thing is the risk register, which I think is also would be a very useful tool for us to decide what we want to look at, and also indeed the financial, you know, the relative financial impacts and other impacts of each of the 700 areas that we could possibly be looking at. So I think we're at a sort of very beginning stage. We're not really in a position now to make a definitive decision about what our forward plan is. But I'd like to state here very clearly that I'm very open to suggestions, and so is, I'm sure, Councillor Gardner-Smith. So if you have ideas, don't wait for the next committee to bring them to us. Just let us know, and we will discuss with officers as well. Okay. Any other further questions on this item or comments? Right, well, I think then we really have come to the end of this committee. Thank you very much all for your comments and engagement. It's been an interesting first committee meeting. Thank you.